So, good morning again, and a very warm welcome to our international webinar about the latest developments, price dynamics, and regulatory framework in the European biomethane market. My name is Felix Hellenkamp, and I'm part of the sales and marketing team at agriportance. This session is hosted jointly by Quantum and agriportance, and we are very pleased to have you all with us today. Before we begin, just a quick note. This webinar is being recorded and anonymized. The recording will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, and you will receive the link via email most likely by tomorrow. At the end of the webinar, you will have the opportunity to ask questions. Simply type them into the chat at any time during this session. You can also find information about our upcoming events on our website in the events section. We'll start today with Hassan from Quantum, who will share his perspective on price trends, deal activity, and demand developments across the European biomethane market. Afterwards, Henning will give us insight into the biomethane plant deployment, regulatory challenges, and the current policy landscape in Europe. To begin, I'm happy to hand over to Hassan. Hassan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Felix. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today, and thank you for having me. My name is Hassan Butt, and I'm here to discuss as Felix said, key developments we're seeing in biomethane. So just a little bit about Quantum. Quantum Commodity Intelligence. It's an independent price reporting agency providing price assessments, original news, and trade data for the global energy transition markets. Of course, our aim is to bring transparency to these rapidly developing markets. Our journalism and market coverage deploys a swift and accurate approach to a wide range of sectors. We aim to cut through the noise and increasingly, in an increasingly complex and nuanced landscape. We have a global presence and a particular competency within energy transition markets, notably carbon and biofuels news and pricing. And we also publish daily market prices for oil, ammonia, and hydrogen, which are used as references in trading contracts and wider benchmarking activity. We are fairly new to the world of biomethane, though, although we do bring a wealth of experience in biofuels. We launched our suite of biomethane price assessments in August this year. And these are priced on a daily basis, covering the UK, Dutch, and Danish markets for both certified, uncertified guarantees of origin, as well as subsidized and unsubsidized. So the aim today is to take you through the European biomethane market. Of course, it's a very complex landscape. 20 minutes, I believe, is not enough time to get through all of this, but a quick agenda and a run through of what we hope to achieve here today is really looking at the biomethane developments when it comes to projects, emerging markets, overall production, and a key question, of course, as many of you are aware, the targets that the industry has set itself, essentially scaling capacity to 35 BCM by 2030. And then we'll move on to some of the growth areas, demand drivers, and then, of course, country overviews and specific developments in the UK, Netherlands, and Denmark, and also, in addition, market pricing and what we can expect moving into next year, which I think will be an interesting year for us all. But if I kick off, then European biomethane production reaches 7 BCM in the first quarter of 2025. This is quantified through around 1,678 plants now, which 56 started this year. The interesting thing, of course, is that production and the expansion of European production has been led by France, which has sort of overtaken a long leading German biomethane and biogas landscape, and this has led to a 30% year-on-year expansion in installed capacity in France, compared to just 6% in Germany. Of the European total, around 6 BCM is within the EU, 27, 1 BCM, of course, in wider Europe. And going back to France, of course, France has a competitive subsidy, and there's been a lot of support. They have a right to inject, a decree that was launched in 2019, encouraging injection. They've set pretty ambitious targets of around 22 terawatt hours of grid injection by 2028, and this kind of compares with a more difficult policy landscape in countries like the Netherlands, Denmark, and Sweden, which has seen their biomethane deployment slow a little bit. And in terms of growth areas, Spain and of course Italy, as you can see from the table there below, which is European Biogas Association data, Italy has been up there with France and Germany, but also Spain is emerging as an interesting growth area now. Of the European total, 85% of EU plants are now grid connected. 45% of those are connected to a distribution network, and 8% to transport. And the interesting thing, of course, is that only 7% of plants have no connection. Which sort of indicates that there is palpable growth in the actual absorption of biomethane molecules in Europe. In terms of feedstocks, which we'll get into a little bit later, I mean, agricultural residues seems to dominate the picture now, with crops and energy crops slowing down now against policy reevaluation when it comes to land use, and of course constraints there have seen a rehashing of the European feedstock policy, and of course we'll get into some of these sustainable feedstocks later. But that's what we see in terms of an overview. The key question, as discussed in the beginning, was can Europe scale up? 35 BCM is quite a lot. It's a fourfold increase from the 7 BCM that we have now. But I think what's interesting is to look at the projects and where some of this impact and this scale is coming from. So we've taken a little bit of a snapshot from our coverage over the last year or so of some projects of note and the investment therein within biomethane expansion. What's interesting is a lot of these, in fact, the bulk of these are in Spain. Of course, 2 or 3 of them are larger portfolio projects, but Spain is emerging as a burgeoning market for biomethane. In terms of upgrading technology, as you can see from the right, membrane separation seems to be the weapon of choice. But it's interesting to note when we were talking about France at the beginning there, France's largest biomethane plant began injecting in September 2024. So fairly recent projects here having quite a big impact, and sizable investment. If we look at all these projects combined, we're talking over around 2 billion euros here. But this leads me on to scaling the sector more holistically. Of course, European Commission has set a non-binding target of 35 BCM, and if you look at the quote there on the bottom left, which is an interesting one to note, and I believe has caused much discussion in the European market, the European Commission specifies that this can be done either as biogas or biomethane, the upgraded version. So that kind of sort of distorts the picture and the perception in terms of scaling from our current level of 7 BCM. If we look at combined European biogas and biomethane production, we're up there at 22 BCM, which would give us around 13 BCM spare or yet to be achieved. Some of these projects, of course, as I mentioned before, pipeline projects that are due to start operations in 2027, 2028 will chip into this 13 BCM number that we're seeing. But if we look below, there are quite varied projections from the EBA and from the IEA as well. If we look at the volume committed already, we're pretty much almost there at 14.8 BCM of biomethane volume committed by 2030. The potential, of course, is to go beyond 35 BCM, and that's the ambition. And if we continue the way we're going, if we take 2023 data from the recent statistical report from the EBA, we reach 15.3 BCM. We see that slowing down a little bit by IEA estimations at around 10 BCM. But the question of can Europe scale to 35 BCM could be answered by saying it might not have to just yet. So it is an interesting topic of discussion, and I think the European Commission hasn't been as concrete as the industry would have liked on this topic. But I think this was addressed potentially. I mean, I believe it was addressed last month in September, where a meeting was held, a tripartite meeting was held. This format of tripartite meetings, it's taken place before in Denmark, the Green Tripartite Agreement in agriculture introduced livestock taxes, emissions taxes. But really this developed out of a previous European wide initiative called the Biomethane Industrial Partnership, which was proposed, of course, the tripartite out of the BIP into this affordable energy action plan, which has the goal of reducing energy costs, completing the energy union, and supporting low cost biomethane, of course, in this instance. The three-way contract that's been discussed last month, however, has caused a little bit of uncertainty still in terms of where the priorities lie with biomethane. You'll see on the right here some quotes from this discussion that was held by the EC, just in terms of how varied the perspectives are in the biomethane world. Scaling the sector, for example, must be done through re-evaluating support schemes, for example. This is already in motion, as we've seen in countries like the UK, Germany, Denmark, and the Netherlands. But also feedstock identification and understanding that complex feedstocks as part of Annex 9A and of course 9B as well. We'll see developing frameworks emerge over the coming year or so. So getting your production in order as a result of that is also a priority in scaling the sector. The goal, of course, is to provide this bankable demand that we're seeing emerge with the projects that I mentioned earlier in new markets like Spain and elsewhere. But if achieved, of course, this will lead to a big saving, a big fiscal saving. So I think this paints a picture of just how divided the biomethane world is. The Biomethane Industrial Partnership set out task forces to address this. I think what was also mentioned in this was feedstocks, which were part of Task Force 3, I believe, completing the energy union, but also the involvement of Ukraine was a big factor there. I believe that's Task Force 6. Ukraine has vast potential, a very mature gas grid. It's a neighbor with Europe. And of course, unlocking that, driving costs down in Ukraine are of course priorities as well. So quite a big job for the European Commission to sort of take on. But this feeds into a wider narrative of creating a single interconnected biomethane market. Now, of course, some of the challenges here of unifying this space are around how we track and trace biomethane from point of origin all the way through to grid injection and other uses as well when it comes to decentralized liquefaction. Now, of course, the proposal of a union database on this basis was has been suggested as a solution to kind of create a single space where economic operators can feed into to a holistic system. However, the review that we're hearing from the market is, of course, that this could be a distant reality. There's not too much progress on it at the moment. No clear goals, of course, and industry bodies and market participants across the trading space as well need clarity on when we can expect this union database. So the legal basis for it is there, in the recast 2024 gas package, integration with existing gas networks, sort of supporting an integrated European network that includes biomethane is there. As mentioned in the beginning, also binding targets. If we want to kind of ramp up biomethane and have it at a low cost and readily available supply level, then binding targets can contribute to that. Certification too, of course, we see bodies like the ISCC, Red Cert, have a difficult job at hand when it comes to certifying biomethane, and the varied production pathways now demand varied demand sources as well that are seeing production patterns change when it comes to achieving CI levels, desired levels. And of course combating fraud, which although less evident in biomethane, I believe in what biofuels has been a big problem for the European market. As mentioned, feedstock harmonization as well begins to take shape with RED III, which is being transposed across Europe as we speak. Mass balance as well, which I believe Henning can talk more about later, but essentially liquefaction by equivalence and revisions to Annex 6 in terms of greenhouse gas accounting there. Clarity also needed on that to kind of join up the dots and unlock the liquefaction potential for biomethane too. And interestingly, a joint purchasing mechanism, which may well be in the works. The European Commission ended a survey last week for a market assessment, inviting participants to give their view on whether aggregated biomethane purchases could be a potential in the future. But of course, moving into more country-specific developments. We'll start with the UK, where I am in London at the moment. It's a very sunny day, but it's getting quite cold now. I turned the heating on last week, so I think biomethane may have a role to play. Of course, the UK, an interesting market post Brexit. Of course, current UK biomethane production sits at around 7 terawatt hours per year. This is largely derived from 700 anaerobic digestion plants. 100 of those upgrade biomethane for grid injection. But these projections, as we see from a recent report by Regen and the MCS Foundation, which was called Making the Most of Biomethane, are quite a scathing report, I would say, as well, in terms of looking at the reality and the potential of biomethane as it pertains to these wide variances in production potential. We can see that the lower end limit is around 13 terawatt hours in terms of production potential out to 2050, and the upper end is 120 terawatt hours. There are reports and projections that go even further than that, at around 288 terawatt hours. But of course, Ofgem administered, which is the energy regulator in the UK, administered its green gas support scheme to sort of pay tariffs depending on plant size. Subsidies are then paid via consumers' gas bills. The support for non-CCS biomethane anaerobic digestion plants is capped there, but the development, of course, is that the GGSS is set to close for new applications in March 2028, and this is said to be sort of dampening investment sentiment in the UK, of course. We mentioned the UDB earlier, the Union Database. There is also, interesting sort of developments as to how the UK will form part of the UDB and whether it can. Of course, we see in the previous slide here cross-border transfers of biomethane guarantees of origin are possible. The UK, of course, is not in the EU, so some clarity needed there in terms of the role that the UK will play, and a successive policy after 2028 when the GGSS sort of runs down could benefit from an alignment with the EU systems, essentially allowing biomethane to count to the UK emissions trading scheme, which would see it benefit from a zero rating and spur development, of course, and maybe nail down some of these production projections into a more kind of agreeable and solidified number. In terms of pricing, however, we are seeing a slightly bullish space for the certified subsidized waste guarantees of origin, waste-based biomethane RGGOs in the UK. Now, of course, the mention of the EU ETS as well. We're talking about essentially ISCC certified UK biomethane GEOs. And there is a sort of demand pull there with these molecules being EU compliant. At the same time, what we're hearing from market sources is that the UK market in terms of supply is very weak at the moment. Large buyers have picked up quite a lot of this stuff, and UK farmers, for example, are reluctant to sell. Knowing that, of course, waste-based and manure-based biomethane production is now seeing increased use in maritime and road transport. So prices and offers we're hearing for waste-based geos in the UK are upwards of £35 per megawatt hour, even £40 for lower CI stuff. Moving on, of course, the Netherlands as well, an interesting market, much smaller market, of course, but an ambitious space at the moment when it comes to their policy and their uptake of biomethane. The Dutch have gone to the polls, I believe, yesterday, and I think D66 might be in order for the next coalition. The market, however, is due for quite a sizable scale up. The Dutch climate agreement targets 2 BCM per year by 2030, and that compares with just 294 million cubic meters in 2024. But of course, a green gas blending obligation in the Netherlands is expected to spur momentum. This will require a 20% blend by 2030, and of course, foreign imports now are expected to count towards this. And of course, the Dutch subsidy as well has application rounds open at the moment for around 8 billion in support. But of course, this scheme is set to be sort of rejigged a little bit next year when it comes to the associated geo value. Producers may have to pay a revenue deduction. But I think also what we're seeing there with the final point on policy uncertainty is that the picture on the table on the right just shows the number of granted applications and operational projects in the Netherlands, and we can see there that in 2023, for example, there were 255 granted applications and then only one operational biogas project as a result of that. You can see the lead time there for the SDE++, and of course the subsidy scheme gives you 4 years to develop your biomethane project. We can see some challenges there in terms of actual development. In terms of pricing, waste as well, in terms of certified and uncertified, is moving up. We're seeing unsubsidized waste priced much higher for 2025, but we're seeing a slight narrowing in the last week or so of these prices as low CI waste is now being offered in the Netherlands, well above the €40 per megawatt level. Producers looking ahead to 2026, of course, the challenges are there with the coalition government and the policy sentiment. The hope and expectation is that Q4 and into Q1 2026 things will develop. The Dutch market will begin to scale up, and of course prices will continue to mature. And then of course I'm just conscious of time. I'm going to run through Denmark very quickly. The big story with Denmark, of course, is that grid injection is the sort of status quo there. You know, a lot of the project. In fact, I believe over 85% of those projects in Denmark inject into the gas grid. This forms part of a target to reach 100% biomethane in their gas mix by 2030. You can see that at 8 terawatt hours per year, it's already a bigger market than the UK, for example, at the moment. But it's a very small population, and so they have this ambition of reaching these high numbers of biomethane. The biomethane share of the gas mix hit 50% in August, for example, the latest data. But it's hit higher than that. It's hit 56% in July 2024. And of course, we can see there cumulatively over the year by year basis on the right hand side, we're now sort of at upwards of 30% on the whole. But of course, a little bit of stagnation has emerged. A new feed-in premium framework, tax clarity in terms of the CO2 tax in Denmark, a new subsidy scheme essentially that provides or is proposed to provide tariffs instead of the issuance of guarantees of origin. Has left the market a little bit unsure of how to move forward in terms of investment. But unsubsidized biomethane sees a tax benefit in this. So in the next slide, of course, we'll see that unsubsidized manure, for example, is gaining quite a lot, with producers opting to switch off the subsidy and get the market price for their biomethane, which in some cases for unsubsidized manure, if you add the TTF and the gas at around low 30s, you're looking at around 120, 130 euros per megawatt hour. A court case last year with a German firm and Sweden's, of course, tax-related double subsidy overcompensation has also dampened sentiment there. Speaking to market participants in Denmark and also at the conference, we see that there are policy developments that need updating there in terms of how creating a robust market and avoiding these kinds of court cases and adverse developments. Here we see, of course, manure and waste in Denmark trending higher. As mentioned, the unsubsidized manure supported quite a lot, but of course a lot of this exported, to the German THG quota markets as well. So yeah, I do believe that Denmark is an interesting space, but I think 2026 moving in, I think to finish the focus points. Of course, Quantum doesn't forecast prices, but we keep regular contact with the market, and of course we are interested in what happens next year, absolutely. But it's an interesting future ahead. I hope I've sort of shed light on that with some of the information previously. But I think what we're seeing in terms of demand activity now, maritime and transport seems to be absorbing a lot of my biomethane and bio-LNG molecules. This trend is expected to continue into 2026. Last week, I believe, or potentially the week before, I'm not sure, but the IMO, International Maritime Organization's postponement of its decision to adopt its net zero framework has also created a little bit of bearish sentiment in the near term. But further out, I think, this from what we're hearing, this could be bullish. Ship owners, vessel operators reevaluating their compliance requirements. Of course, the decision, however, to delay for a year will then subsequently leave FuelEU Maritime as the preeminent framework for decarbonising maritime. And we're hearing from the market that this could suggest bullish sentiment. You have to pay, I believe, a 650 euro penalty for non-compliance. In Q1 2026, you're going to have to report your compliance if you're a vessel operator. If you bought up some operations early on and you were a first mover in this space, you could be making good money. A source mentioned the other day that biomethane could move up in terms of manure derived or transport biomethane to the hundreds, 200s, 300 per megawatt hour. In terms of maritime scope and maritime pooling. The question there is how will this affect production? Will we start seeing more low CI stuff develop, and will producers start to react to this demand transition? And then finally, of course, the RED III transposition, which is taking place across Europe, ETS2 from 2027, which will bring new markets, new outlets for biomethane, and of course, as mentioned, progress on UDB. A formalized ban on Russian gas, which was reported last week, could all see this trading landscape evolve. So I will leave it there. Thank you. I'm sorry if I ran over a little bit, but I'd like to thank the agriportance team for their help and assistance in this and the wonderful work they do. And I'm around for any questions at all. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Hassan, for these insights into the current movements and dynamics across Europe. If you have any questions, please feel free to post them into the chat. We'll get them during the Q&A session. Next up, we continue with Henning Dix, who will discuss the regulatory developments, challenges, and progress in biomethane plant expansion across Europe. Henning, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Felix, and also Hassan for your good overview. The next step, I think I'm not sharing my screen yet, right?
Yes, you share. We can see it.
It's shared. Good. So, yeah, first of all, thank you, and also for your participation. My name Henning. Personally, a strong background in German biogas agri industry. I'm one of the founders and CEO of the company agriportance. Today, I would like to speak a little bit about plant development in Europe, also how our perspective is in this regard, from our daily work with different producers, but also with different off-takers in the market. And furthermore, also I will give some challenges we see. I looked at the list of participants, so there are a few of you which may be not in touch before with agriportance, so therefore I will give a small overview. So we started 4 years ago with a two-sided business. On the one side, the RED compliance and gas shipping. There we have a software and service concept for all RED II, RED III related topics, and also the shipping of biomethane. What we're doing with our software is like we're having different modules like a GHG balance module, a mass balance module, and also a certification module. And yeah, at the moment there are more than 70 biomethane, bio-LNG producers, mostly from Middle Europe, which are using this software. And beyond, we're also having a matchmaking process where we biomethane, liquid CO2 bio-LNG, but also German GHG quota broker between producers and off-takers all over Europe. But what are we seeing from this trading activities in Europe? So I brought 3 opportunities, but also 3 risks and challenges to the table, which are quite important. So on one side, opportunities, growth levers in a dynamic market. We clearly see that there is a policy-driven growth. We see that within the RED III, with national mandates, with different blend quotas, subsidies, we see a good momentum for biomethane, depending a little bit on the market where you are and in which market you can sell, but there is somehow a growth from a policy side. But also what we see currently as a major trend in the European market is a shift towards negative CIs. We see for such a quality a growing demand in Germany, the Netherlands, and also other markets, and a really high interest and also good premiums for negative CI biomethane. So to give you a little bit an overview, in the year where we started agriportance, in the red 1 period, nobody was talking about CI score, GHG balances, some quota mechanisms which are more based on the carbon intensity. In the year 2021 and following 2022, we started in the German transport sector with a GHG quota that you got more money for biomethane with -100, -50. Now with maritime, with the FuelEO maritime, we see also there interest to doing to the compliance and surplus mechanism to pay more for -20, -50, -100. But also we see other markets upcoming, like the Biomethane verplichting in the Netherlands, so the Dutch heating obligation. We also see it with in different transport sectors, like in the Netherlands, in Czech Republica, where they're also switching from an energy-based quota to an CI-based quota. So this is something we see as a European-wide trend. And also in this regard, of course, a trend switching from crops to waste and residues, which goes a little bit along in the different systematics. Yeah, and therefore new use cases emerging like the maritime sector, green hydrogen from biomethane, etc. But we also see other use cases which are stagnating or getting smaller. So these are like really the opportunities we see. And we also see that a lot of producers, traders, but also end users of biomethane are leveraging these opportunities in the upcoming years or having already a good strategy in place. On the other side, what do we see in our daily work as risk and challenges? On the one side, a really regulatory fragmentation within Europe. So we really have country-specific rules and implementation timelines for different things. So even in Germany, we have like different quota mechanisms. We have like different subsidy schemes in place, for instance, for the electricity from a gas power plant, which is using biomethane in the EEG. And this fragmentation we also see it in the Netherlands, and in each country it's like slightly different, which makes like cross-border trade and also for a producer expanding from Italy to Spain with new plants, not that easy. And it's also something which we clearly identify as a hurdle in the market and also for the whole value chain, because we did not really have a European vision on how the biomethane market should look like. And besides of the vision, of course, steps to really have one European market. We see that there are some countries are more in favor of protectionism, so that the biomethane stays in the country and not domestic biomethane is into the country. But also other European countries are more in favor of having like also this European biomethane market. Second risk and challenge, of course, is the volatile pricing and also demand. Hassan showed prices of the last weeks and months, where we clearly see in the markets he showed that the prices are increasing, which is somehow good, of course, because then you realize in the whole value chain there is somehow money is getting generated. But what we saw over the last 3-4 years is maybe too high volatility when it comes to the prices in specific markets, for instance, in the German transport sector, but also we see it in other certificate markets. Where these price fluctuations lead to that financing is difficult for new projects, both equity financing, but also debt financing, which makes it not so easy, for instance, for a Spanish or Dutch producer to get funding. Also, this whole overcapacity risk is there because it's a market which has not so much liquidity as other commodity markets. And also the high dependency on political frameworks makes it maybe not so easy for traders, but also for producers of biomethane to navigate these markets or to hedge also the risk. And also the whole transaction and verification reaches a high complexity, so the whole mass balance, GHG reporting, sustainability checks, we see there a high risk when not done properly in the market for the whole value chain. But despite the risk, we still see a growing market. And of course, with the right partners, digital tools, and flexible trading strategies, these risks can be turned into scalable opportunities. Especially we see this whole shift towards negative CIs as a quite good opportunity for the market, especially for waste-based plants to install also a CO2 liquefaction, but also to switch maybe to more manual feedstocks to really get the project even more a business case or like so better opportunities. When we have a look into the European market, what we see here, data from EBA since 2011, we see that the market is growing, especially in these years 2020 to 23. Yeah, nearly 150, 180 plants on average per year. We see a small decrease in growth in 2024. But what we foresee and what Hassan also showed is that there are it's a big pipeline of different project developers in Spain and also in other European markets, also in Eastern Europe with Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia. And furthermore, we also see currently that in Denmark, there are new projects getting developed and also existing projects expanded. So that's the growth we saw in the years 2020 to 23 will go on. Yeah, also the market will diversify a little bit more so that you have more countries where there are at least a few production units, as it was like in the early years where there were only a few countries who maybe have 100 or 50 plants. So therefore the market will be more mature in the next years and also more diversified with the origin of biomethane across Europe. Yeah, when we look at the different production countries, you see the two big producers, France and Germany. We also prospect a bigger growth in France in the next years than in Germany. So Germany currently in the years 2022, 2023, we saw nearly every month 2 to 3 new biomethane plants. Currently, there are maybe only a few left which come up and running this year, mostly waste-based or menu-based plant due to the fact of the bankruptcies of the two traders and lost trust. France has a slightly better position with a suitable feed-in tariff and also the outlook with the new quota, which will be up and running soon. Other markets which are relevant, I think Hassan also mentioned, like Denmark, Italy, UK, where we also see, especially with Denmark, Italy, UK also a growth. The Netherlands is quite interesting. So you have, due to the Stickstoffverpflichtung, quite big hurdles to get a permit for a new plant or also expansion of a plant or getting an upgrading unit. But the market is interesting from a production side because of their existing SDE subsidy scheme. So the existing feed-in tariff, and also due to the fact that with the Biomethane and also the new transport obligation within the Red III period, there will be new demand coming. And therefore, of course, when a Dutch producer gets a permit, it's quite interesting and gets the plant up and running. But Denmark has a little bit better position, or producer from Denmark, because permits are easier. And also they're having like this new auction system for the feed-in tariff. And also, maybe a little bit different mindset when it comes to the politicians there, and also giving them like good tailwind for new production units. So this is like a little bit overview. So in our daily work, we always have a lot of questions regarding this cross-border trade. Therefore, I wanted to show you like 2 slides to give you a feeling how biomethane, for instance, can be traded between Denmark and Germany of the ARB hub and also ERGA, which are somehow a little bit competing organizations within Europe. So therefore, I wanted to give you a little bit the definitions of it and how they can be used. The AIB Hub is the Association of Issuing Bodies. It's a European platform for exchanging guarantees of origin. They have their background more in the power side, so electricity, and therefore they are nearly active in all European countries, especially for power, not so much for biomethane. What they want to ensure is a standardized and reliable energy tracking across the member countries. And what they're doing, they connect national registries via the AIB Hub for cross-border GO transfer. Covering power, gas, and hydrogen. ERGA is a European network for biomethane and renewable gas registries. So no power here in place. It's more like biomethane, hydrogen, and so on. Enables cross-border transfer of biomethane certificates, and works towards harmonization of national registries, verification rules, supports this recognition of biomethane origin between member states. So these two systems can be used, but be aware, AIB Hub is not active in every European country, the same as ERGA. With the AIB Hub, here you see the actual map where they are active. Please be aware, only where there is this flame, that's also biomethane. So for instance, Portugal, Spain, France, they are doing only power, but quite new in the Netherlands, they're active in Belgium, Czech Republic and Austria, and also in the Baltic area. So this is like where the AIB Hub has a good foothold, and also where it's quite easy and good accepted to transfer GOs between these countries. For instance, what's currently an issue, so Germany is not part of the AIB Hub. It can come in the next years. So there are also plans with Umweltbundesamt, with the UBA, to adapt there to the AIB Hub. But for instance, a German producer or German trader who wants to sell, I don't know, -100 unsubsidized manure into the Dutch market for the Dutch Biomengenverpflichtung, we currently see it also in with Vertis, they are not possible to transfer it into the Dutch Biomengenverpflichtung because Germany is not part of the AIB Hub. But to be honest, it can change. AIB Hub and also the Nederlandse Emissieautoriteit, we see still possibilities, but this is something where you see Germany is not part of the AIB Hub, the Netherlands, yes. So there are still some harmonizations to do, and it's somehow also the risk and struggle I showed in the beginning that there's this high fragmentation. When it comes to the ERGA, you see here different parts of Europe where ERGA has his Germany. The Netherlands is dropping out because they are now in the AIB Hub in the upcoming months. So this is something I wanted to show a little bit the differentiation between AIB Hub and ERGA, because we're having a lot of questions there, especially when it comes to the cross-border trade of GOs. Methane into the German market. I always like to show this slide because I don't want to confuse you. I just want to show you how complex the different target markets for biomethane, which can go to Germany. Gs like the German transport sectors, the CNG, LNG stations, EEGs like classical biomethane CHPs who are using biomethane to generate also an EEG subsidy, that's electricity. GEGs like the heating obligation, the Gebäudeenergiegesetz. BAGs like a CO2 tax, which will be replaced by the EU ETS 2. And EWMAGs like a regional heating obligation. NTHGs like EU ETS 1. And you see, depending on the target market, and also there are different differentiations, whether the size of the CHP plant in this regard, or the end usage, whether you want to use the biomethane for power production, or for instance to produce fertilizer. Also there you have then to use either BZ or the DINA biogas registry. and in some cases even both systems. So it's an Abisi system, which is more like for handling the POS, and the DINA Biogas Registry, who's also more handling like the different EEG boni and the different EEG classifications, and so on. And also, yeah, with a further layer of the UDB and also the GO registry, which can come from the Umweltbundesamt, from the Uber, there are further layers of complexity coming to the market. And this is also something we see, yeah, as not so easy, and also as a big hurdle in the market, because, for instance, many industrial clients, when they see something like this, they need a lot of consulting and a lot of discussions, and maybe they will never buy biomethane because the complexity and the risk are too high for them. So there we clearly strike for simplification, not only on a German base, but also on a European base. Yeah, so this is something I wanted to show you today. Thank you very much for your attention, and yeah, I'm happy to receive questions in the Q&A.